Welcome back to the fourth and final part of our journey through the history of WrestleMania. In this final installment, we will be covering the most recent decade of the show of shows, from the shocking conclusion of WrestleMania 31 to the electrifying and emotional WrestleMania 40. If you haven't yet, be sure to check out the first 3 decades of WrestleMania covered in the first 3 parts. Now, without any delay, let's dive right in. WrestleMania 31. While WrestleMania 30 may have had some major surprises, WrestleMania 31 also had a few tricks up its sleeve. Most notably, Seth Rollins cashing in his Money in the Bank title shot after Brock Lesnar spent a majority of the main event literally throwing Roman Reigns around the ring like a ragdoll. Known by many as the heist of the century, it was a shockingly great ending to a WrestleMania. Though the ending was great, WrestleMania 31 was probably the first time I remember thinking, dang, these things are long. A problem that this era's WrestleManias had. A problem that would honestly only get worse with each installment of the show until its move away from one-night WrestleManias. My personal favorite match of the night also involved Seth Rollins, who faced off against Randy Orton. The finish of this match saw Randy Orton hit a crazy RKO off a failed stomp from Rollins. An RKO so cool, it helped spawn the RKO out of nowhere meme craze. Also on this card was John Cena vs. Rusev, a feud that echoed Rocky IV, but was perhaps too on the nose for some, but I don't care. Rusev's tank entrance was awesome. As a big Terminator fan, I also got a kick out of Triple H's entrance for his match against Sting, a match that probably would have been more fondly remembered if Sting had won. Speaking of greats with supernatural-esque gimmicks, we finally got the Bray Wyatt vs. Undertaker match, a match that one can't help but think could have benefited if the streak were still intact. Let me know who you think should have ended the streak, if anyone at all. WrestleMania 32. After some genuinely shocking results in the previous 2 years, WrestleMania 32 took a step backwards and suffered from some questionable booking decisions, predictable results, and a thinned out roster due to injuries with the likes of Seth Rollins, Daniel Bryan, and Randy Orton all excluded from this year's card. The inaugural WWE Women's Championship was the saving grace of the show and injected some much needed integrity and legitimacy to the women's division. The 3 women had the best match on the card and really stole the show. I personally think Sasha Banks, Charlotte Flair, and Becky Lynch should have been the main event of this show. The ladder match for the Intercontinental title was also a blast, and Zack Ryder winning was a pleasant surprise, especially with a field of wrestlers who today are main eventing top shows. Well, not Sin Cara, but whatever. Beyond those 2 matches, this is where this WrestleMania really begins to show its flaws, further exacerbated by the ridiculous 7-hour runtime if you include the pre-show, leaving fans exhausted by the time of the main event. A predictable main event no one really wanted, as Triple H was defeated by a forced babyface big dog Roman Reigns and yet another failed attempt to get him over with fans. Other matches like Brock Lesnar vs. Dean Ambrose and Jericho vs. AJ Styles failed to live up to expectations, with the latter having the potential to be an all-time great match, further tainted by the decision to have Jericho defeat Styles in his WrestleMania debut. Undertaker had a Hell in a Cell match with Shane McMahon of all people. Going back and watching this match, it's a pretty slow affair, and only partially redeemed by a Shane O'Mac attempted flying elbow off the 20-foot cell. The Rock also had an impromptu match against Eric Rowan that lasted seconds, basically just a cheap fan service moment. In the end, this was largely a forgettable, fluff-filled WrestleMania, carried by nostalgia and a couple of memorable moments. WrestleMania 33. This was a WrestleMania full of surprises and memorable moments, but in hindsight, most of them were rendered meaningless by the next year. In my opinion, there wasn't really a show-stealing match at WrestleMania 33. The opening match between AJ Styles and Shane McMahon exceeded expectation and was probably the best match on the card. Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens had a good match, capping off their very entertaining road from friends to enemies. But let's be honest, this match should have been for the Universal title rather than the US title. The Universal title was instead fought over in a car crash of a match between Brock Lesnar and Goldberg, a match that somewhat redeemed their debacle of a match at WrestleMania 20. The biggest surprise of the night was the return of the Hardy Boys, which received easily the biggest pop of the night, as they would go on to capture tag team gold. The near 3-year rivalry between Seth Rollins and Triple H also finally came to an end. This show's main event, though, was between The Undertaker and Roman Reigns. The match was yet another legend passing the torch to the next generation. The Undertaker's age was clearly catching up to him, as he did not look good in this match, and it ended up being pretty visibly sloppy. Following the match, the Phenom left his jacket, gloves, and hat in the ring, as he walked away out of the arena, in a way that made it seem as if we'd never see him wrestle again. However, that wasn't the case, as The Undertaker returned the very next year at WrestleMania. Heck, even John Cena's proposal to Nikki Bella following their mixed tag match didn't stand the test of time, as they never ended up getting married and are now both married to other people. While there was a lot of enjoyment to be had on this show, especially at the time, the lack of long-term development, coupled with being far too long, brought this show down by the end. WrestleMania 34. Another year and yet another ludicrously long WrestleMania. A problem that would just keep getting worse before it got better. WrestleMania 34 returned to the Superdome in New Orleans for a show that started off pretty hot, but once again fizzled out by the main event, and this time in historically bad fashion. But to open this show, we had an exciting triple threat match for the Intercontinental title between three of the best workers in the company, Finn Balor, Seth Rollins, and The Miz, kicking off the night on a high note. Following this, Charlotte Flair and Asuka had likely the best pure wrestling match on the card, even though there are people who today are still split on the decision to have Charlotte go over, thus ending Asuka's undefeated streak. Then we got the most fun match on the card with a mixed tag match, and dare I say one of the best mixed tag matches ever, as Ronda Rousey made her in-ring debut where she teamed with Kurt Angle to face off against Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. Ronda came out of the match looking great, even getting the chance to beat up on the game a bit, really putting the women's roster in the world unnoticed. Another highlight was Daniel Bryan's first match back after being cleared and coming out of retirement when he teamed with Shane McMahon to face off against the always entertaining Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Outside of those matches, the night really began to go downhill quickly. The Undertaker returned once more to squash John Cena in a sub 3-minute match, largely retconning his poor retirement match from the year before. There was also a case of AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura, a match that on paper should have been an instant classic, but rather produced an uninspired by-the-numbers match with the wrong outcome. Braun Strowman then won the tag team titles, teaming with a 10-year-old. While certainly a heartfelt moment, it did nothing to help elevate the already poorly managed tag titles. Then came the main event. After 13 matches in nearly 7 hours, the last thing the crowd wanted to see was Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar spam finishers for 15 minutes. The worn-out crowd let their dissatisfaction known as they showered the match with boos and "This is boring" chants. Lesnar's victory was admittedly somewhat unexpected, but even he left in a bad mood, throwing his newly won title at Vince McMahon backstage in a fit of rage. Not the way you want to close out your biggest show of the year. WrestleMania 35. In what would be the final one-night WrestleMania, thank God, the WWE delivered a more worthy show with WrestleMania 35. Even though the main event didn't start until literally the next day, the show opened with Seth Rollins dispatching Brock Lesnar in quick fashion, earning himself the Beast Slayer moniker. The peak of the show, for many, was the culmination of Kofi Mania, when Kofi Kingston defeated the evil tree hugger Daniel Bryan for the WWE Championship. It was such a special moment seeing Kofi finally win the WWE Championship after years of dedication to the company with all the fans behind him. Roman Reigns had his first match after battling leukemia, receiving a much more positive response to years prior. Batista also received a worthy retirement match as Triple H finally defeated him at the grandest stage of them all. A satisfying end to their decade-plus rivalry, sending Batista off to Hollywood on his own terms. Kurt Angle also received a retirement match against Baron Corbin. The match was fine and all, but Corbin just seemed like such a random opponent for one of the best to ever do it to go out against. This WrestleMania certainly could have used 2 nights, and when it was finally time for the main event, it was after midnight. Thankfully, the first ever women's match in the main event of WrestleMania ended the show on a high note. Becky Lynch was victorious over Charlotte and Ronda Rousey for the undisputed women's title, cementing her as one of the all-time great female wrestlers and ushering in Becky 2 belts. A good show overall, but held back by its bloated card and insane length. WrestleMania 36. Occurring in the spring of 2020, WrestleMania 36 was undoubtedly the most strange and unique WrestleMania to date, in both good ways and bad ways. With the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, this WrestleMania was certainly at risk of not even occurring. But WWE has always had a show-must-go-on mentality, and that it did, occurring in front of no live fans at the WWE Performance Center, and the first to be taped across 2 separate nights, WrestleMania 36 was forced to adapt. Considering the circumstances, this WrestleMania had no right to be as good as it was. Was it great? No. But them delivering 2 nights of quality sports entertainment escapism during a weird and scary time for everyone was all it had to be, and that it was. On night 1, we got a series of solid matches, such as Daniel Bryan versus Sami Zayn, a fun 3-way ladder match, Kevin Owens versus Seth Rollins doing what they do best, and one of two cinematic matches that this WrestleMania presented, with a boneyard retirement match for The Undertaker facing off against AJ Styles. This was the retirement match The Undertaker deserved, especially considering the situation. Taking place off-site in a graveyard, Taker and AJ Styles put on a performance that almost felt like you were watching an episode of Sons of Anarchy, as he revived his American badass persona one final time, burying AJ Styles in a grave as the iconic bell rings out, a fitting send-off to one of the greatest performers and wrestlers to ever grace the squared circle. On the second night of WrestleMania, we got several solid matches such as Charlotte vs. Rhea Ripley, a last man standing match between Randy Orton and Edge, a match that may have dragged on a bit, but it's Randy Orton and Edge, two of my all-time favorites, so I really enjoyed it, as I did with this feud overall, a feud that I believe is largely underrated. The penultimate match of night 2 was the second cinematic match, this time a Firefly Funhouse match between John Cena and The Fiend Bray Wyatt. Some may consider this match to be totally absurd, and it's not really even a wrestling match, but no one can deny his creativity and storytelling. In an almost dreamlike retrospective into John Cena's career, the two men told a bizarrely refreshing story the likes never done before by the WWE, let alone at a WrestleMania. The main event saw Drew McIntyre finally get his moment, winning the WWE Championship from Brock Lesnar in dominant fashion. But unfortunately, no fans were there to rejoice with him, a moment still being used in storytelling today. This WrestleMania, while likely not anyone's favorite, played with the unfortunate hand it was dealt, and played it to the best of their ability, pushing the envelope and adapting to the circumstances way out of anyone's control. WrestleMania 37. Returning to Tampa Bay in 2021, WrestleMania 37 welcomed back live fans, be it at limited capacity due to COVID restrictions still in play. The star of the show, though, were the performers, who certainly didn't lack in the spectacular department. Seth Rollins, who never fails to deliver at WrestleMania, had a solid match against Cesaro, and Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre slugged it out, while recording artist superstar Bad Bunny had a really fun match tagging with Damian Priest against The Miz and John Morrison, shocking fans with his athleticism and in-ring work, opening the door for future quality celebrity involvement. Night 1 also had an historic main event between Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair for the SmackDown Women's Championship. It was the first time ever that two black women were in the main event of WrestleMania, and the first time a singles match between two women was in the main event. Bianca Belair emerged victorious in a very good match that helped elevate her career while also allowing Banks to further cement herself as one of the best in the business. A really nice WrestleMania moment for both ladies. Night 2 just didn't really hit as hard as Night 1, a problem recent WrestleManias have yet to solve. A decent chapter in the Zayn Owens saga helped the mid-card, with the added bonus of KO hitting Logan Paul with a stunner, foreshadowing things to come. The main event of Night 2 was a triple threat match between Roman Reigns, Edge, and Daniel Bryan for the Universal Championship. All three seemed like viable champions at the time, and the match didn't disappoint. Roman had finally found his calling, and it wasn't as a babyface they had tried to force on us all those years. It was as a final boss level heel. His commanding victory, stacking his two opponents on top one another, let the world know that Roman was here to stay, and whether you love him or you hate him, you will acknowledge him. Looking back, WrestleMania 37 really seems like a transitional WrestleMania, foretelling the dawn of a new era. And while it was a show carried by a few matches, it did a solid job of bouncing back from the pandemic and setting the stage for the future. WrestleMania 38. Taking place in a packed AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, WrestleMania 38 sought to bring back the pageantry, spectacle, and grandeur that WrestleMania is known for, and that it certainly did do. This WrestleMania would capitalize on a lot of things that have made other WrestleManias a success, from celebrity involvement to returning legends, while also establishing the new format that is WrestleMania Weekend, designed to further hype up the two-night show. Night 1 was near perfection. The Usos will retain their tag team titles, elevating the usually mishandled titles to heights not ever seen before. Drew McIntyre finally used his sword to destroy the ring after defeating Baron Corbin. Social media superstar and influencer Logan Paul had an impressive showing teaming with The Miz to defeat Rey and Dominic Mysterio. Then Bianca Belair would win the Raw Women's Championship in arguably the best match of the night when she would defeat Becky Lynch. Also, Cody Rhodes made his triumphant return to the WWE after 6 years away from the company, a time in which he helped found AEW, WWE's most serious competition in years, which I believe gave WWE a much needed kick in the ass. Here though, he would have a classic match with Seth Rollins, kicking off their brilliant trilogy of matches. The main event was an oddly booked KO show hosted by Kevin Owens, with special guest Stone Cold Steve Austin. To the delight of the Texas crowd and the whole world, it turned into an impromptu match. I can't say I ever thought Stone Cold Steve Austin would be main eventing WrestleMania in 2022, but as they say never, and that's just another reason I love wrestling. The best part of the whole thing was it didn't just serve as a cheap Austin pop. The match was really good, and the two men worked magic, with Austin surprisingly taking some pretty serious bump. Austin of course won, and a beer-filled celebration ensued. The crowd loved it, and so did I. Night 2 was also really good, but didn't fully live up to the hype of Night 1. Starting off with a triple threat tag team match where the odd couple duo of RK Bro retained their tag team titles. Johnny Knoxville from Jackass fame also defeated Sami Zayn in a super entertainingly stupid anything goes match with the help of his Jackass buddies and their delightful shenanigans. Sasha Banks and Naomi would also defeat 3 other teams to win the women's tag team titles. Interestingly, this would also be Sasha Banks' first and only win at WrestleMania. Edge and AJ Styles didn't fully live up to expectations, but it had an interesting ending with Damian Priest. Pat McAfee also had a fun WrestleMania debut, defeating Austin Theory in a fun match which was followed by an impromptu match featuring Vince McMahon. McMahon would defeat McCaffrey in his first WrestleMania match since WrestleMania 26, before Stone Cold Steve Austin showed up to stun everyone and drink beer. This is probably the last time we will ever see Vince McMahon at a WrestleMania. In the main event, we got a match we've seen at 2 other WrestleMania events. This time though, it wouldn't be as hated, as Roman Reigns would overcome Brock Lesnar in an explosive but anticlimactic main event for both the WWE and Universal Championships. Both nights had their highs and lows, but this was probably the best 2-night WrestleMania that WWE had put on up until this point. WrestleMania 39. 2023 show harkened back to WrestleMania 21, once again being billed as WrestleMania Goes Hollywood. But WrestleMania 39 would take place in the state-of-the-art SoFi Stadium outside of Los Angeles. This show really pulled out all the stops and almost delivered a flawless card filled to the brim with great matches. Night 1 opened with probably the biggest letdown of the show, with the match between John Cena and Austin Theory. It was a pretty by-the-numbers heel victory, as Theory tapped out to the STF while the referee was knocked down, giving Theory a cheap victory over Cena. Thankfully, the night would only improve after the opener, with every single match pretty much delivering a WrestleMania-worthy performance. The tag team showcase match that followed really kicked things into high gear, allowing all the talent to shine. This match really lacked any story, but more than made up for it with a chaotic, fun display with awesome spot after spot. Up next was Seth Rollins against Logan Paul. As has been the case, Paul continues to be scary good at this stuff. There were some really great near falls in there, and Rollins was the right choice to help walk Paul through the match on such a huge stage. The KSI Prime Bottle spot was especially entertaining. At this point, it was really clear that it was only a matter of time until the Maverick had gold around his waist. Also on night 1 was a father and son blood feud, as Rey Mysterio dished out some much needed corporal punishment on his son Dirty Dom, who only continues to impress as a detestable heel. Then, in what my opinion is the greatest WrestleMania women's match in history, Rhea Ripley defeated Charlotte Flair. This match really felt like a big deal, and both ladies put it all on the line. It almost felt like a passing of the torch, as Rhea is now arguably the most over and dominant woman on the roster. The main event of night 1 was all about the moment, and it was a smash hit. As the longest reigning tag team in history, the Usos took on the duo of Owens and Zayn, who for months had been on the receiving end of the Bloodline's wrath. It was a heck of a match with a lot of energy, and the best way to close out a pretty awesome night, as the Usos' reign came to a very satisfying end. Oh, also Shane O'Mac blew out both of his quads, shades of his father, at the 2006 Royal Rumble. Night 2, while certainly not the feel-good night that Night 1 was, still put on a fantastic show. In what was my match of the year in 2023, Gunther defended his IC title against Drew McIntyre and Sheamus. All 3 guys had moments where they looked like they were going to win. The dramatic spot when Drew pulled Sheamus off of Gunther after he had just delivered a bro kick, stopping his friend from winning. Ultimately though, the ring general was undeniable, as he hit a powerbomb on Sheamus onto Drew's back and then hit another powerbomb on Drew, a terrific way to end an incredible match. Go watch this match if you haven't. It's so damn good, it really feels like they're beating the hell out of each other the whole time. Bianca Belair kept her WrestleMania record perfect by defeating Asuka in a solid match. I really think they might try to have Bianca go on a bit of a streak of her own at WrestleMania. Probably nowhere as long as The Undertaker's, but give her a couple more wins and it'll have a bit of prestige all on its own. Then in perhaps Edge's final WrestleMania match, he faced off against the Demon Finn Balor, in a match that would have definitely been better if they didn't have to stop halfway through to clean up Balor, who had begun to bleed heavily from his head. Now for the main event, as the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns put his record-breaking title on the line against the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes, desperate to finish his story. It was an epic, outstanding main event level match. The match ultimately, though, was slightly held back by all the cheating from the Bloodline. But it was an emotional match full of drama with an ending that, while controversial at the time, has been essential towards the build of WrestleMania 40. WrestleMania 40. 2024 brought the 40th anniversary of WrestleMania, a show built on a level of hype arguably not seen in decades. In what's now being called the biggest WrestleMania in history, the WWE orchestrated a masterpiece, two-night extravaganza that lived up to the hype and fully ushered in a new era of professional wrestling like none we've ever seen before. Night 1 kicked off the festivities in Philadelphia with WWE's Chief Content Officer Paul Triple H Levesque welcoming the over 72,000 fans to the biggest show in the company's history, firmly proclaiming the official dawn of a new era. Rhea Ripley and Becky Lynch started things off in a terrific opener. Both women displayed incredible chemistry. The closing moments of the match saw Rhea hit Becky with a riptide on the top of a turnbuckle, followed by a second riptide to retain her women's championship, further cementing her domination of the women's division. A really great match all around, but ultimately fell short of topping her clash with Charlotte a year prior. Up next was a chaotic six-pack ladder match for both tag team titles, filled with all the usual awesome, brutal spots that make ladder matches so much fun. In the end, they thankfully finally split the tag belts. In what was a bit of a surprise, Grayson Waller and Austin Theory unhooked and claimed the SmackDown Tag Team Championships, while The Miz and R-Truth, on the other hand, took home the Raw Tag Team Championships. A really fun and awesome WrestleMania moment for the two undeniably entertaining veterans. The future of the tag team division is in great hands, as the teams look great and now have the opportunity to battle for both tag titles on both shows. Then the newly acquired Andrade and Rey Mysterio clashed with Dominic Mysterio and Santos Escobar. As expected, this was a fast-paced, exciting match. Rey, Andrade, and Escobar were great, and Dom continues to get better and better, both in-ring and out of the ring, drawing heat like few others can. There was also great involvement from the other members of the LWO, with a sweet slingshot rope launch from Wild. The end of the match was a bit out of place, but still entertaining, as Lucha mask-wearing Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson of the Eagles helped the babyfaces claim victory, a fun moment for the Philly faithful. Unfortunately, the next match was easily the weakest of both nights, as Twin vs. Twin, Jimmy vs. Jay fell pretty flat. The video package and entrances were both great, but once the match began, it just fell off. For a brother versus brother match, there should have been more heat here, but ultimately it was just a super kick fest that lacked the extra gear to get it over. Jay and Jimmy have always had incredible chemistry as a tag team, but for some reason, however, they failed to click against each other here. Outside of the yeet, no yeet back and forth punching spot, the crowd seemed to be a little bit underwhelmed as well. Jay won in the end, but for a feud that has lasted months, it was quite a letdown, leaving Brett vs. Owen as still the unquestioned best brother versus brother match. Thankfully, things picked up again afterwards with the 6-woman tag match between Damage Control and the ES team of Jade Cargill, Naomi, and Bianca Belair. The match was the usual predictable tag team match flow, giving each competitor some time in the ring and at least one moment to shine. However, predictability doesn't really matter if the action is good, and there was plenty to enjoy here. Belair was impressive as ever with her displays of power and agility. She's in my opinion the most impressive female wrestler on the roster, and always puts on a great show, leaving me beyond hype for the inevitable clash with her and Rhea. When Jade Cargill finally entered the match, the crowd lit up, and she went after everyone on the opposing team. She picked up the win for her team in dominant fashion. Cargill's WrestleMania debut was a big success. The future of women's wrestling in the WWE looks very bright with these competitors on the roster. The Intercontinental Championship was next, and was perhaps the most surprising outcome of the night. The might of Gunther had been unmatched in his historic title run, dispatching every opponent who dared challenge him. But the forever scrappy underdog Sami Zayn rose to the occasion. Kevin Owens was there to wish Sami luck before he made his way to the ring in a really cool entrance that gave this match a cool cinematic feel. Zayn is a natural babyface, but against a monster heel like Gunther, he becomes even more of an underdog. The crowd was heavily behind him and hung on to every moment. Zayn survived some of Gunther's biggest moves, including a massive clothesline and 2 brutal power bombs. The champ became more frustrated and started punishing Zayn, rather than going for the pin. This hubris from Gunther gave Sami a chance to come back, as he nailed him with a Helluva kick, followed by a super brainbuster. He then drilled Gunther with 2 more Helluva kicks to get the pin and the win. After a roller coaster of a year and a half, Sami Zayn is our new Intercontinental Champion. Gunther's devilish 660-day reign was finally brought to an end by the underdog of underdogs. It was then time for the Night 1 main event, the biggest tag team match in history, as the final boss Rock and the tribal chief Roman Reigns squared off against Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins to determine the stipulation of WrestleMania 40's Night 2 main event. Whatever the case was, behind the scenes, they really did a great job building to this match, to prepare fans for the chaos that followed. The first several minutes were quick exchanges and posturing, but things really picked up when Rhodes and Rock were in the ring together. The Great One and Rollins ended up fighting into the crowd, but The Rock told the ref he would fire him if he counted him out, thanks to his new role as a member of the TKO board of directors. From that point forward, The Rock started cheating to win without worrying about any consequences. For a long time, it was Rock and Reigns decimating Rollins and Rhodes. This was done well in a way to make it seem like the babyfaces were in an impossible position, and it worked, with a ton of really well done near falls. The Rock was extremely impressive and looked like he hadn't missed a step, something I was admittedly concerned about before the match. He even ended up going through an announce table courtesy of a rock bottom from Rhodes. In the end, Rock pinned Cody to make Sunday's main event Bloodline Rules. I really enjoyed this match, and I didn't even really notice its long runtime, clocking in at just over 44 minutes, making it the second longest WrestleMania match in history, behind Shawn and Brett's Iron Man match at WrestleMania 12. Despite a few flaws here and there and the disappointment of Jimmy vs. Jay, I really liked Night 1, but one couldn't help but hope that Night 2 would truly raise the bar. Even if you were in the camp that felt that Night 1 could have been better, it's really hard to say that Night 2 didn't elevate this WrestleMania into an all-time status. Night 2 started off really hot with the World Heavyweight Championship between Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre, both who had really cool WrestleMania-worthy entrances. The match was extremely fast-paced, with a ton of finishers and cool spots, really setting the tempo for the whole night. McIntyre would in the end finally defeat a battered Seth Rollins, claiming the title and the WrestleMania glory he so desperately craved. However, in his victory, his ego got the better of him, as he mocked CM Punk ringside, who snapped and attacked him, allowing for Damian Priest to finally successfully cash in his Money in the Bank and win the World Heavyweight Championship, setting up a very intriguing title picture for the new Big Gold Belt. Up next was probably the least anticipated match on the card, with Bobby Lashley and the Street Profits facing off against the Final Testament in a Philadelphia street fight. However, this match ended up being a ton of fun, helped by the addition of ECW original Bubba Ray Dudley as special guest referee, and Snoop Dogg on commentary. We saw kendo sticks, trash cans, and chairs brought into the ring and used by both teams at various points, paying homage to ECW in the city it called home. Towards the end, Karrion Kross ended up getting in Bubba Ray's face when he counted a near fall, but Lashley used this opportunity to hit a spear. Ford and Dawkins did some signature Dudley Boy taunts and moves, much to the delight of the Philly crowd. After one failed attempt, Ford hit a big frog splash to put Kross through a table and get the win. This was a fun bit of chaos that didn't overstay its welcome, a nice addition to the card. Third match of Night 2 was LA Knight vs. AJ Styles. There were no titles and no stipulations, so this was one of the only bouts from the weekend that was just a standard singles match. Styles debuted a new theme song but didn't get much time to play. He then ran into the ring and the match got started right away. They did a great job of making this feel like a grudge match right from the start. Knight had every right to be upset after Styles flew all the way to Australia to attack him inside the Elimination Chamber back in February. Both these guys are very talented, so nobody expected a bad performance, but they seemed determined to make sure their performance was not overlooked, as it was outside of the title picture. The finish saw Knight counter a phenomenal forearm with a great BFT, a really solid WrestleMania singles debut for LA Knight, who hopefully will see some gold in his future. Next, the United States Championship was on the line when Logan Paul defended his belt against Randy Orton and Kevin Owens in a triple threat match. He had a fun entrance, riding in a big truck with a Prime cannon, accompanied by the infamous Prime mascot to the ring. Backstage, Sami Zayn was waiting to wish KO luck, just like Owens did for him on Saturday. He drove a golf cart into the ring, and when it was time for Orton's entrance, he backed the cart up and gave the Viper a ride to the ring. A really fun moment for sure. Orton and the prize fighter turned this into a handicap match at the beginning and took turns suplexing Paul onto the announce table over and over again. They eventually realized only one of them could win, and the Viper almost hit an RKO on Owens. When KO had avoided it, they had a pretty hilarious exchange. Once again, WWE picked two perfect people to book against Paul. The three men worked together to put on a match that was very entertaining, especially when Randy unleashed on the Prime Bottle guy ISHO Speed. With some really great spots, funny moments, and creative offense from all three competitors, any complaints one could pinpoint would be minor and insignificant. Whether you like or hate Paul, you have to respect the work he puts into his matches. After taking an RKO, Owens ended up taking a frog splash from Paul to give him the win. It's clear that Paul's title run still has a lot of fuel in it. The WWE Women's Championship match was contested between two former allies, Bayley and Io Sky, who used to be close friends in Damage Control, but now the role model finds herself out of the group and fighting alone. Both women had great entrances, but were all business once they got into the ring. Once the Genius of the Sky took control, she began to focus on the same leg has had problems with for years. This was a competitive back and forth fight with standout spots. After all the mayhem and chaos we saw in every other match, it was impressive how these two superstars made a normal contest with no weapons or interference feel important. That's just how good these two women are at what they do. Both women had some creative counters to finishers, but when the dust settled, it was Bayley who got the pin to become the new women's champion. The main event of WrestleMania 40 saw Cody Rhodes challenging Roman Reigns for the second year in a row, but this time, thanks to The Rock, it was bloodline rules, and anything could happen. Both men had absolutely epic entrances fit for an event of this magnitude, and Brandi Rhodes made an appearance with her husband. It was really cool to see. Despite this match being under bloodline rules, they worked a standard match at first with holds, counters, and takedowns, like we would see in any other bout. They battled in the ring, at ringside, and in the crowd. They used weapons and parts of the set and anything else they could find that would inflict damage. They really combined good wrestling with storytelling to make a compelling main event. There were several false finishes to build anticipation for the pin that would eventually end the contest, including near falls with both men using each other's finishers. Then, inevitably, both Usos showed up and ended up crashing through a bunch of tables next to the stage to take each other out. A quick moment that topped anything from their match the night before. Solo Sikoa then showed up and almost cost Rhodes the match. But then, the iconic trumpets rang out, and John Cena ran out and fought Solo Sikoa before hitting Reigns with an attitude adjustment and then setting Solo through an announce table with another AA. Then The Rock's music hit, and he walked down to give us a thrice-in-a-lifetime moment with Cena, before hitting Cena with a rock bottom. Then The Shield's music hit, shocking both The Rock and Reigns. Seth Rollins showed up with a chair, but Reigns cut him off with a Superman punch. At this point, it seemed like anyone might show up, and as The Rock was winding up to unleash on Cody with his belt, legendary gong that for decades has struck fear across the WWE rang out. The spirit of WrestleMania himself, the man who delivered so many classic moments on the grandest stage of all, The Undertaker, stood face to face with The Rock. The crowd was electric as the dead man chokeslammed the Great One before exiting into the dark as quickly as he arrived. After this, Reigns took out Rollins with a chair rather than going for Cody. As promised, Seth was Cody's shield. This allowed the American Nightmare to grab Reigns and hit him with 3 crossroads to finally defeat the Tribal Chief, putting an end to his legendary title run. As the new champion celebrated, several members of the roster, all who had been wronged by the Bloodline, joined him in the ring to celebrate. This match was overbooked in the best way possible and provided a satisfying conclusion to the 40th annual WrestleMania, and really a conclusion to years of storytelling. I really felt as if I was 10 years old again watching this. The excitement and emotion was unmatched. And I, for one, can't wait to see what this new era of WWE has in store. Just an incredible WrestleMania.